Scotland is a land that has witnessed a bloody history of intrigue and betrayal. The victims of cruel torture and untimely death have become restless spirits, doomed to linger in its haunted castles. Cursing the generations that follow, their suffering echoes down the years. These tormented souls have become the castle ghosts of Scotland. Have you ever seen a ghost? Some shadowy form glimpsed out of the corner of your eye? A half-seen figure that disappears suddenly the moment you turn to face it? Here in Scotland, where I live, I've more than once had the uncanny feeling that, though I may be alone, someone or something is watching me, that I'm being visited by a ghost. But that is not unusual in Scotland. Scotland's past is as rich and dramatic as its landscape. Its great mountains and dark, secretive glens still echo with the battle cries of centuries ago. As well as Scotland's warlike traditions, there exists a strong belief in the powers of the supernatural. It is said that some Scots have the gift of foretelling the future, known as second sight. Each clan had a seer who was given to premonitions. But this gift of prophecy is more often a curse, for death and disaster constitute the commonest visions. Hauntings and paranormal activities are often concentrated in particular places. A wood, a silent lake, a holy site or buildings where gruesome events have taken place. All over Scotland, relics of an ancient past confound modern man with their strange images and sounds. Scotland's turbulent history seeps into the present day and creates powerful apparitions. And Scottish castles, where much of that history has been played out, are where a great many of these hauntings have been experienced. Their very stones echo with the struggles they have witnessed. It is in these strongholds that the ghosts of the victims linger on. Scottish castles were the sites of many bloody battles fought to preserve independence against the English. But within Scotland's own borders, thousands were slaughtered as a result of violent feuds between different Scottish clans. A haunted fortress stands on the west coast of Scotland, in the region of Argyll. This is Duntrune Castle, dominating the rocky headland overlooking the Sound of Jura. Built more than 800 years ago to guard the surrounding countryside against raiders from across the sea, Duntrune is the oldest continuously inhabited castle in Scotland. Now a peaceful home, it was once the scene of bitter clan fighting. To this day, Duntrune is haunted by the heroic deed of a lone piper who paid for his clan loyalty with a gruesome death. Mysterious music is often heard, the piper's desperate tune, carried on the wind across the misty waters. The sound of Scottish pipes has haunted the castle for many years, summoning memories of Duntrune's brutal past. Other paranormal events occur within the castle. Furniture moves of its own accord. Objects hurl themselves at walls. Clocks stop. And a gruesome discovery was unearthed beneath the castle flagstones. Duntrune Castle has been in the Malcolm family since 1792 and is today the property of Robin Malcolm of Poltalloch. It's long been said that the spirit of the Piper of Duntrune is still about the castle. Do you think he's here?
Yes, certainly we do. My wife and I never feel alone here, and our dogs will sometimes let us know if something is passing. Don't you?
"400 years ago, our sitting room was the approach to the main castle entrance. So anybody coming or going had to go through that room.
On certain nights, the Malcolm's dog behaved strangely, as if it had seen and heard something.
I wish I could see what it is the dog's seen or felt. I haven't yet, but I hope one day I shall.
To understand the hauntings at Duntrune, we must return to its blood-stained past. Duntrune was owned by the powerful Campbell clan. During the 1600s, Scottish clans were fiercely individual, ferociously holding sway over their regions. At that time, as a result of a civil war raging across Britain, the Scots were divided. The Campbells fought on the side of Parliament, while others, like their enemies the MacDonalds, supported the King, Charles I. Hearing that most of the Campbells were away from their castle at Duntrune, Colkitto, a MacDonald chieftain, took advantage of the situation and attacked the castle. As soon as the MacDonalds had taken Duntrune, Colkitto sailed away to continue his campaign. He left behind a small garrison and his loyal Piper to guard the castle. Pipers held an important place within the Scottish clans. Well educated and travelled, they ranked highly in the chief's household. When going into battle, the Pipers stood forth alone, piping the men onward, their focus of loyalty. The Campbell clan were determined to regain their castle from the MacDonalds. In Colkitto's absence, they mounted a counterattack. Eventually, the Campbell clan recaptured Duntrune. Every MacDonald was put to the sword, except one. The MacDonald piper. As privileged individuals, pipers were protected. Colkito's piper was spared. Imprisoned in the castle and surrounded by enemies, the piper knew that his master would return to Duntrune. At any time, Colkito's boat could appear across the waters, bringing him back and heralding the MacDonald clan's return to the castle and almost certain death. As day dawned, the piper scanned the horizon for a glimpse of his master's boat, desperate to find a way of warning him. At last the piper saw a shape on the horizon and made out the MacDonald galley. He did the only thing he could to warn his master. He began to play his pipes. Across the waters, Colkito heard the faint strains of the bagpipes. He thought he recognized a familiar tune and assumed it was a welcoming air from his piper. But as he sailed nearer, the notes suddenly changed. And he realized that this was instead an urgent warning saying to him, "Beware, turn back."
Bear away!
Colkito turned his boat about, and the MacDonalds sailed away to safety. But for the piper there was no escape. For the Campbells had realized the message in the tune. A punishment was found to fit the crime. They cut off his hands so he could play no more. The piper bled to death from his wounds. Those who dismissed the story as a romantic myth were suddenly confronted with gruesome evidence. In about 1880, a chilling discovery was made beneath these flagstones. Repairs were being carried out here, and the stones were being replaced. Suddenly one of the workmen gasped in horror.
Hey John, look at this.
He called his workmate over. Staring up at them from its shallow grave was a human skull. When the surrounding slabs were lifted, a full skeleton was revealed. They saw quite clearly the skeleton had no hands. The workers and the castle lord stared in amazement. Surely the bones that lay before them were the mortal remains of the ghost that haunted the castle, the Piper of Duntrune.
We commend into thy hands, most merciful Father, the soul of this our brother departed.
The lord of the castle asked the bishop to give the skeleton a proper burial and to exorcise the spirit that roamed Duntrune.
With us. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God,
The bishop performed the rite of bell, book and candle.
and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
But despite the exorcism, the piper's spirit still seems to dwell within the castle. So was the spirit of the piper not laid to rest?
We think not. I've got a letter upstairs from my father to a friend saying that things happened that couldn't be explained in the normal way.
In spite of the disturbing events, objects being moved and broken, the Malcolm family learned to accept the ghostly presence. But why is the Piper still haunting Duntrune? The reason is thought to do with the circumstances of his burial. As a MacDonald, the Piper was more than likely a Catholic, but the burial service was Episcopalian. The Malcolm family believes that the Piper's spirit was never truly laid to rest. A single standing stone marks the spot where the skeleton is said to have been buried. It is known as the Piper's Grave. But though he is nameless, his courageous act has immortalized him, the Piper of Duntrune. It is thought that some supernatural phenomena create changes in atmospheric pressure, alterations in the Earth's magnetic field, and that animals with their acute senses may more readily detect and react to a spirit force than man, who often experiences no more than a sense of unease. The lost soul the dogs seem to notice. The haunting pipe music. Perhaps it is the Piper returning to his post to pipe his lonely tune. Another Scottish castle has 3 fearsome hauntings. On the east side of Scotland, in the Grampian region north of Aberdeen, stands Fyvie Castle. The great facade has been likened to a French chateau, with its 5 impressive towers, each one a monument to the successive families who have owned the castle. Long before Fyvie's oldest surviving tower was built around 1400, the land was a royal hunting forest. It was from here that King Robert the Bruce dispensed justice. But the castle's baronial exterior hides a ghostly history. Sometimes the very stones and mortar of a building become the focus of supernatural power. Inanimate objects retain influences from the past. This seems to be the case at Fyvie Castle. Fyvie is steeped in mystery and strange tales. It is a castle with a disturbed soul, blighted by 3 different hauntings. A hidden chamber which causes blindness or death to those who disturb it. A centuries-old evil curse laid upon the castle, still felt by those who work there. And the ghost of a betrayed wife, the Green Lady, who walks Fyvie's long corridors to this day. The castle's remarkable supernatural events are so evident that they have even convinced an unbeliever. The curator of arms and armour at Fyvie is Major John Peyton. 3 years ago, he had an experience in the castle that altered his views on the supernatural. Do you find yourself laughing at the people who believe that Fyvie is full of spirits, ghosts, and curses?
Not at all. There was a time when
The Major explained that as an army man, he'd always been a great cynic who didn't believe in ghosts. But two experiences in Fyvie Castle affected him so much that he was forced to change his mind.
I tend not to treat it as a laughing matter anymore.
One wet January afternoon, as the Major entered Fyvie's drawing room, he stepped aside to let somebody pass. But when he looked, no one was there. Only a strong rose perfume was left hanging in the air. The Major searched for a logical explanation, but when he questioned the domestic staff, he discovered that no rose-scented products, no room sprays or polishes were used in the castle, and that at the time of the incident he had been entirely alone in this tower. Then a month later, another incident occurred.
Hello. What's been bothering you?
The Major was urgently summoned to calm down a tourist who was in great distress.
Right. Looking in this mirror.
The visitor described to the Major how she'd been looking around a bedroom when she saw something in the mirror that scared her half to death. Through a haze of shimmering green appeared the figure of a woman in a long, full dress, ropes of pearls around her neck. Then, in the blinking of an eye, she was gone. The visitor was in a terrible state. She thought no one would believe her, but the Major told her she was wrong.
Oh, you're not going mad.
He believed her.
You do? Yes, I do.
But who do you think it might be, this figure that you both experienced?
Oh, without any doubt in my mind, the Green Lady of Fyvie.
The Green Lady is thought to be the ghost of Dame Lilias Drummond. In the early 17th century, the owner of the castle was Alexander Seton, Lord Fyvie. He lived in the castle with his wife of many years, Dame Lilias. But Seton was dissatisfied with her. He was a dominating personality and singularly ambitious. They had 5 daughters, but not a son, the heir he longed for. Relations of Dame Lilias lived nearby. Among the family was a young girl, Griselle. Seton and Lilias had known her ever since she was a child, and now that she'd blossomed into a beautiful young woman, Seton fell passionately in love with her. Suddenly, Dame Lilias was reported unwell. Within months, she was dead. Whispered rumours about how Lilias had died echoed around the castle. They focused on a tiny room at the top of one of the castle towers.
My Lord Seton.
Seton, they said, had locked his wife up in this room. Anyone who attempted to release her was thrown out of a nearby window. Alone and half mad, Lilias starved to death. Only weeks after his wife's suspicious death, Seton married the young Griselle. Because of his powerful position within the Scottish hierarchy, Seton's actions were never questioned. Dame Lilias, however, would soon return to take her revenge on the new bride and groom. On their wedding night, Seton and his new wife heard the sound of heavy sighs from outside the window. Seton tried to calm Griselle's fears by telling her that it was only the sighing of the wind. He opened the window and looked out, but the night was still, and he could see nothing in the darkness.
There is nothing at the window.
Seton again assured his young bride that there was no need to worry. But as the night wore on, the sounds coming from the window grew louder and more human, like the cries of a woman in great despair. In the morning light, Griselle cautiously approached the window. She saw that something had been carved on the window ledge. In letters nearly 3 inches high and inscribed from the outside were the words, D. Lilius Drummond. They remain here to this day. Dame Lilius had returned from the spirit world to exact her vengeance. The Green Lady is a startling apparition, but though her appearance is distressing, she rarely causes harm. Another supernatural energy found within the castle is deadlier. At the center of its mystery is a hidden room and an ancient lethal curse. Christopher Hartley is the assistant curator for the National Trust of Scotland and headed the team who restored Fyvie. Of course, all round Fyvie, they believe that there is a secret room in the castle. Is there any truth in that? Is there a hidden chamber?
Well, Fyvie is certainly a very busy house. It's surrounded with stories and ghosts and legends. And indeed, when we came here, we did find an unexplained space underneath this room, the charter room. And the room itself has got concealed in the walls various cupboards which open, such as this one here, where behind the panelling you find a blocked wall behind this door. And who knows where that might have led? Somewhere possibly down to a stair. The surveyor wanted to open the concealed room downstairs, but we persuaded him not to. After all, there's a most terrible curse attached to anybody who dares to open it.
Twice in Fyvie's history, the curse of the hidden room was invoked. The curse is quite specific: death to the lord of the castle or blindness to his wife if anyone disturbs the chamber. In 1816, General William Gordon, the Lord of Fyvie, attempted to find the hidden room. The general failed to find easy access, and very soon after his attempt, he died. From that time, his wife, a former domestic servant in the castle, was afflicted by a blindness, with which she went to her grave. Some members of the family were undeterred. 60 years later, another Gordon, Sir Maurice, determined to enter the secret room. But on the very day that his workmen started the job, Sir Maurice fell and broke his leg. He immediately ordered the work to stop before anything worse could happen. He thought he'd evaded the curse. However, very shortly afterwards, his wife developed a painful condition of the eyes, which plagued her for the rest of her life. Already crowded with supernatural phenomena, Fyvie houses yet another mystery. It is known as the Curse of the Weeping Stones. Its ominous presence hangs over the castle and can still be felt to this day. The tale of the curse is as old as the castle. More than 500 years ago, a prophet named Tamas the Rhymer was renowned for his gloomy predictions. He was ill-tempered and always quick to take offense. Tamas announced that he wished to visit Fyvie Castle. In anticipation of his arrival and to welcome him, the castle's great doors were opened and were kept open at all times. But the years passed, and Tamas had not come. Still, the door stood open. 7 years and a day after he'd first announced his intention to visit the castle, Thomas arrived. But as he approached the entrance, a freak storm blew up. The door slammed in his face. Thomas viewed the incident as a personal insult, and in his anger he laid a curse upon the castle and its lands. The curse spoke of 3 stones taken from the boundary markers of the castle lands. Until all 3 stones were found and reunited, a hex would remain on Fyvie. Thomas's curse of the weeping stones decreed that the firstborn sons of the families that lived at Fyvie would never inherit the castle. One stone was recovered and has been protected ever since. The other stones were never found, and the curse remains on the castle. To the owners of Fyvie, the curse of the weeping stones is very real indeed, because through the generations, Fyvie has passed to second sons or daughters, in some cases more distant relations, the natural heirs being lost to wars and sickness. The curse is so powerful that the one weeping stone that has been recovered still exerts its evil influence. Christopher Hartley came under the stone's spell when he was working on its conservation and display. He soon had reason to wish he'd never set eyes on it.
While we were working at the castle, I spent quite a lot of time with the weeping stone, examining it and preparing it for show to the public. And it was strange that every time I seemed to be closely working with it, shortly after something terrible happened to me. The first time, having worked very closely with the stone, I twisted my ankle. And so did the surveyor, who'd also seen it on the same occasion. The next time I sprained my knee very badly, and the third time when I put it into a showcase, I was rushed to hospital in the middle of the night with kidney stones. I don't like to look at the stone anymore or go too close to it at all. I try to avoid it if I can.
The weeping stone also has remarkable and unexplained physical properties. Although kept in dry conditions in a wooden bowl, the stone becomes wet and the bowl fills with moisture. The story of the weeping stones is an enigmatic tale which generations of Fyvie's owners have been unable to ignore. The castle's eerie history is very much alive, and though today it's tourists, not courtiers, who throng the corridors, Fyvie teems with spirits from the past. As Christopher Hartley says, the air here is very busy with more than human visitors. One great Scottish castle has a royal and haunted lineage. In the midst of the lush Angus landscape, at the centre of what was once a holy region, is Glamis Castle. It is without doubt the most haunted castle in Scotland. Shakespeare chose Glamis as the setting for his tragedy Macbeth. Here it is said King Duncan was stabbed to death by Macbeth. Glamis hath murdered sleep, Macbeth shall sleep no more. But the real lords of Glamis, the Lion family, have a long and violent history as dramatic as any Shakespearean tragedy. Originally a hunting lodge of the King of the Scots, Glamis was given to the Lion family in 1372 by King Robert II. The castle was the childhood home of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. In the calm light of day, this massive castle, with its turrets, fortifications and spires, exudes serenity, power, grandeur, even magic. But as night falls, the fairy tale image gives way to something more sinister. Glamis ghosts are numerous and legendary. Phantoms have been sighted in the castle for hundreds of years, and one Lord of Glamis is said to have been visited by the master of all evil. A strange atmosphere pervades the castle chapel, a feeling not threatening but of overwhelming sadness, and the sound of a strange, hollow knocking. The atmosphere gradually intensifies into an aura around an ethereal grey lady. She kneels quietly at the altar, saying her prayers. With this ghost, at least, the owners of Glamis feel no unease, only sadness. They know only too well her identity and the reasons for her hauntings. She's one of Scottish history's most tragic victims, a lady of Glamis who was condemned as a witch and suffered a terrible fate. 400 years ago, the close links between the Scottish royal family and Glamis Castle had dreadful consequences. The 6th Lord Glamis had married the beautiful and accomplished Janet Douglas, and they had a son, John. The family lived peacefully at Glamis until the Lord died in 1528, leaving his wife in a very vulnerable position. Janet belonged to the Douglas clan. Her brother was stepfather to the king, James V, who despised his tyrannical stepfather. His loathing grew into an obsession, and he carried out a ruthless vendetta against the Douglases. The innocent Janet became the focus of the king's hatred. As a widow, Lady Glamis no longer enjoyed the protection of marriage, and King James seized Glamis for the crown. Lady Glamis was accused of magic and sorcery, of witchcraft, and mixing deadly potions with which to poison the king. No one doubted that these charges were completely false, but she and her son were arrested and taken to Edinburgh Castle, where they were imprisoned in its dark, fearsome dungeons. Meanwhile, King James occupied Glamis, held court here, and seized its contents for himself. Imprisoning Lady Glamis had been easy. Convicting her of the charges levelled against her proved much more difficult. Janet's character was without blemish. She was much respected by everybody who knew her, so that to procure testimony of her alleged treachery, the king had to resort to torture. Lady Glamis's faithful servants and clansmen were stretched on the rack to extract false evidence against her. Her 16-year-old son John was forced to witness these horrors before he himself was brutally tortured. These savage tactics worked. The king had his confession.
Guard! Guard!
Janet was convicted of witchcraft, and she and her son were condemned to death. On the 17th of July, 1537, Lady Glamis was led out to her execution. Almost blind because of her long incarceration in a dark dungeon, she was brought onto the Castle Hill of Edinburgh, where she was burnt alive. The onlookers fell silent. An eyewitness account of the execution described her suffering with great commiseration, being in the prime of her years, of singular beauty, and suffering, although a woman, with a manlike courage. Her innocence was never doubted. The account concluded that all men believe that the true cause of her execution was not witchcraft, but the hatred which the king carried for her brothers. Janet's son John was luckier. Although condemned to death, he was reprieved until he came of age. But before this happened, James V himself died. Before his death, the king is said to have felt remorse for his action. It was the black spot in his reign, for he was generally known as the poor man's king for his many good works. On the accession to the throne of his baby daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, the title, lands and the ransacked castle of Glamis were restored to the young Lord John. From the time of Janet's execution, the apparition of the Grey Lady began to appear at the castle. Although she died in Edinburgh, it is here, to her home, that her spirit returns. The hollow hammering sound often heard in Glamis when she appears is believed to be the ghostly echo of workmen building the scaffold on which Lady Glamis was put to death. Ghosts do not always seek out the living. Some, like Glamis's Grey Lady, keep returning to a particular place, oblivious, apparently, of the living world around them. Like a recording of the past, trapped in the castle's atmosphere, her image is played and replayed. Other hauntings are attributed to so-called ghosts of conscience. They attempt to connect with the living as a warning so that the living may avoid their terrible fate. They need to make contact. This is the case with another of Glamis' disturbing manifestations. Unexplained sounds have been heard in the castle late at night. Men's voices arguing, the rattle of dice, and the spectre of an enormous man with a long flowing beard. Many of these hauntings have focused on the bedroom known as the Blue Room. One account recorded in the 1870s described the event. A guest at the castle, the wife of the Archbishop of York, was staying in the Blue Room. She awoke with the feeling that something had brushed her face, but she couldn't see anyone in the room. Suddenly a figure loomed over her, a figure with a long flowing beard and the face of a dead man. At other times in the castle, late at night, the family has been disturbed by the sound of men's voices raised in anger, cursing, and the rattle of dice being thrown. Sounds that seem to emanate from this walled-up chamber within the castle crypt. Could these strange sounds and the haunting in the Blue Bedroom be connected? In 1454, Patrick, the first Lord Glamis, was said to have played host to an evil visitor at the castle. Lord Glamis was known for his love of gambling and often played cards with Earl Beardy of Crawford, so called because of his long, thick beard. The pair were playing together late one Saturday night when a servant entered and reminded them of the hour. It was nearly the Sabbath, and gambling was forbidden on the Lord's Day.
Time is wearing on.
Oh, wait, no bother me, man. Can you not see him in the middle of a game?
But the men ignored him and played on. At 5 minutes to midnight, the servant again entered and pointed out the time.
My lords.
"We care not what day of the week it is," Earl Beardy roared. "If we have a mind to, we shall play until doomsday." He would regret his words. Still the men played on. Then on the stroke of midnight, the door opened. A mysterious stranger entered. He proposed to join them in a game. The stranger sat down and placed a stake of sparkling rubies on the table. The three men started to play. Lord Glamis and Earl Beardy soon got into a heated argument. The stranger looked on. The sounds from the room became loud and furious, and the servant longed to enter and see what was happening. But as he approached the door, he reeled back in terror. The two gambling men were enveloped in flames. That night the castle knew it had entertained the Prince of Darkness, Lucifer. The two men were condemned by the devil to play until doomsday. The price for gambling on the Sabbath. Michael Fergus Bowes-Lyon is the 18th Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn and lives at Glamis with his wife and young family. The story of Lord Glamis and the Earl of Crawford and their third partner is a fantastic tale. Do you know where the room is in which they played?
Well, I think my ancestors definitely blocked up a room here, and it is known as the secret room. I don't know where it is, but it could well be within feet of where we're standing.
Blocking up the room did little to silence the noises. And could it be that the spectre of the bearded corpse was in fact the Earl, condemned as one of the living dead? In Scotland, the dark and rugged beauty of the landscape reminds us of the country's vivid history. Its warring ancient clans, hard-fighting men, and their violent battles. Bloody revenge and cruel deeds that echo down the centuries. In the twilight world between sleep and waking, spectres from another time move into our existence. To each of us they appear as something different. Sounds, smells, spirit forms. Across the waves the warning notes from a loyal clansman play on forever. A name etched in stone. A tangible reminder of a betrayed wife from the spirit world. Rising through the smoke and flames, an innocent, wronged soul returns home. Two men, prisoners in an endless game, are fated to play on until doomsday. In Scotland's ancient castles, how many of these imprints from the past linger on the fringe of our existence? Even here in my own home in Scotland, I'm not alone. This house was built on the site of an ancient monastery, and my resident spirit is a monk who walks the house at night and stokes the fires. Why he remains here is a mystery I've not yet solved. In the meantime, he's a gentle and useful ghost. I can live with him.